Chapter 2, Privacy, Security, and HIPAA. The learning objectives for Lesson 2 is 1. To be able to name the two provisions of Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA, that relate to most healthcare. 2. Explain the difference between Title I, Health Insurance Reform, and Title II, Administrative Simplification. 3. Define and discuss HIPAA roles, relationships, and key terms, including HIPAA in the practice setting. 4. Describe the privacy rule under HIPAA. 5. Define and discuss protected health information, PHI. 6. Identify the difference between disclosure and the use of PHI and discuss exceptions to HIPAA. 7. Illustrate the difference between privileged and non-privileged information. 8. Explain patient rights under HIPAA. 9. Explain responsibilities of the healthcare organization to protect patient rights under HIPAA. 10. State the guidelines for HIPAA privacy compliance. 11. List the 3 major categories of security safeguards under HIPAA. 12. Discuss the security rule and how it relates to coding and billing. 13. Define the provisions of the HITECH Act. 14. Explain the purpose of the HIPAA Omnibus rule. 15. List consequences of noncompliance with HIPAA and the HITECH Act. 16. Discuss how HIPAA affects all areas of healthcare office, including the organization and staff responsibilities in protecting patient rights. And 17. Discuss what to expect from a healthcare organization when it comes to the various HIPAA policies and procedures. Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA. There are 2 provisions of HIPAA. Title I is the Health Insurance Reform, provides continuous insurance coverage for workers and their insured dependents. The Title II is the Administrative Simplification. That's the development and implementation of standardized electronic transactions, implementation of privacy and security procedures. HIPAA projects a long-term benefits that include lower administrative costs, increased accuracy of data, increased patient and customer satisfaction, and reduced revenue cycle time, ultimately improving financial management. Clearinghouse is an independent organization that receives insurance claims from a physician's office, performs software edits, and redistributes the claims electronically to various third-party payers. Under the Title II, it created legal rights for patients regarding their health records. Key terms. A covered entity applies to any healthcare provider, healthcare organization, health plan, or clearinghouse that transmit health information into electronic form for any number of transactions. Electronic media refers to the mode of the electronic transmission. Could include the internet, extranet or private networking using internet technology to link business parties, leased telephone or dial-up telephone lines, including fax, modems, transmissions that are physically moved from one location to another using removable or digital memory, mediums such as magnetic tape or disc, optical disc, or digital memory card. Healthcare provider or healthcare organization extends to anyone who provides healthcare services to a patient. In addition to physicians, this could include hospitals, ambulance service providers, clinics, physician assistants, nurse practitioners, social workers, chiropractor, dentists, nursing homes, pharmacies, and others. Security officer protects the computer and networking system within the practice and implements protocols such as password assignments, backup procedures, firewalls, virus protection, and contingency planning for emergencies. Transaction refers to the transmission of information between two parties to carry out financial or administrative activities related to healthcare. HIPAA in the practice setting. HIPAA requires the designation of a privacy officer to develop and implement the covered entity policies and procedures. The organization's PO may hold another position within the healthcare organization or may not be an employee of the organization at all. Sometimes the PO is a contracted professional who is available to the healthcare organization in an advisory capacity or an interim compliance officer. This advisory role may be filled by an attorney or other professional with extensive compliance experience. A business associate is a person or entity that performs certain functions or activities using healthcare information on behalf of a covered entity. It is considered an extension of the healthcare organization and is held to the same standards under HIPAA. Covered entities should have a business associate agreement in place with all entities that work with them. HIPAA's federal privacy regulations apply unless the state laws are more stringent regarding privacy, a situation referred to as state preemption. A state law is considered to be more stringent if it does the following: gives an individual greater access to his or her healthcare information, prohibits disclosure that would be allowed under HIPAA, or narrows the duration of an authorization to release information. The privacy rule, confidentiality, and protected health information. Key terms: protected health information, PHI. PHI is any information that identifies an individual and describes his or her health, status, age, sex, ethnicity, or other demographic characteristics, rather that information is stored or transmitted electronically. It refers to any part of the patient's health information that is transmitted by electronic media, maintained in electronic form, or transmitted or maintained in any other form or medium. Privacy is the condition of being secluded from the presence or view of others. Confidentiality is using discretion in keeping secret information. Integrity plays an important part in the healthcare setting. Disclosure means the release, transfer, provision of access to, or divulging information to people or entities outside the healthcare organization. Consent is the verbal or written agreement that gives approval to some action, situation, or statement. In healthcare, a consent is a document that gives healthcare organization permission to use or disclose PHI for TPO. In contrast to a consent, the HIPAA privacy rule requires a signed authorization for any uses and disclosures that are not routine and are not otherwise allowed by the rule. Authorization is an individual's formal written permission to use or disclose his or her personally identifiable health information for the purpose other than TPO. Individually identifiable health information is any part of an individual's health information, including demographic information, for example, the address or date of birth, that's collected from the individual by the covered entity. This information relates to the individual's past, present, or future physical or mental health or condition, the provision of health care to the individual, or the past, present, or future payment for the provision of health care. IIHI data identify the individuals or establish a reasonable basis to believe that the information can be used to identify the individual. And use means the sharing, application, utilization, examination, or analysis of health information within the organization. The privacy rule, confidentiality, and protected health information. With the authorization form, it must state if the healthcare organization receives remunerations for specific marketing or research activities. The consent form for use and disclosure of information is not required by HIPAA, but some practices use it. The use is when patient information is accessed within the healthcare organization. And remember, disclosure is when patient information is given to an authorized outside party. With confidential information, the billing specialist is responsible for maintaining the confidentiality of the patient's PHI. There are certain information or communications that are exempted from the HIPAA rule. Breach of confidential communication is considered a HIPAA violation. And it's considered a violation because, remember, HIPAA requires that PHI be kept confidential, so unauthorized release of PHI is considered a violation. In most healthcare facilities, employees will need to sign a confidentiality statement as part of the hiring process. Don't discuss a patient with acquaintances. Don't leave confidential information exposed. And don't leave confidential information visible on a computer screen. Properly dispose of notes, paper, memos by shredding. Be careful to remove original documents from the photocopier. Use common sense and follow confidentiality guidelines. Privileged information is related to the treatment of the patient, and non-privileged information is unrelated to the treatment of the patient. Non-privileged information does not need an authorization form, but is released only on a need-to-know basis. And what must the patient do in order to authorize the release of privileged information? They must sign an authorization to release the information or selected facts from the medical record. Patient's rights. Never discuss patient information with anyone other than the physician, insurance company, and authorized individuals. The privacy rules have patients' rights under HIPAA, such as the right to notice of privacy practices. The NPP is tailored to each organization, and every patient must have access to it. The right to request restrictions on certain uses and disclosure of PHI. The right to request confidential communications. The right to access, inspect, and obtain a copy of PHI. Right to request an amendment of PHI. And the right to receive an accounting of disclosures of PHI. Now you must refer to the Policy and Procedures Manual for clarification when disclosures are permissible. To what information do patients not have access? And that would be psychotherapy notes, information for legal proceedings, and information exempted from disclosure under CLIA. Obligations of the healthcare provider. Policy and procedures. Verification of identity and authority. You must always verify the requester has the right and the need to have PHI. Validating patient permission. Training. Safeguards. Complaints and workforce sanctions. Mitigation. And remember, Mitigation is to alleviate the severity or make mild. The provider must mitigate any harmful effects of a breach in confidentiality and refraining from intimidating or retaliator factors. Guidelines for HIPAA privacy compliance. Reasonable and appropriate safeguards must be taken to ensure that all confidential health information in your office is protected from unauthorized and inappropriate access. Consider conversations that can be overheard. Limit information requested on patient sign-in sheets. Make sure patients sign a form acknowledging receipt of NPP. And keep the computer screen turned so that viewing is restricted to authorized staff. Also, you want to keep your usernames and passwords confidential. Safeguarding your work area, placing medical records face down, and not posting the healthcare provider's schedule. The security rule, administrative, technical, and physical safeguards. The security rule addresses only ePHI due to technology standards. However, the guidelines should be applied to all PHI. Administrative safeguards prevent unauthorized use or disclosure of ePHI through administrative actions. Policy and procedures to manage this include the selection, development, implementation, and maintenance of security measures to protect ePHI. These management controls guard the data integrity, confidentiality, and availability. Technical safeguards are the technological controls that are put in place to protect and control access to the information on the computers in the healthcare organization. They would include the following: access controls through limitations created for each staff member based on job categories. Audit controls keep track of the logins to the computer system, administrative activities, and changes to data. This would include changing passwords, deleting user accounts, and creating new user accounts. Automatic logoffs prevent unauthorized users from accessing a computer when it is left unattended. The computer system or software program should automatically log off after a predetermined period of inactivity. Physical safeguards also prevent unauthorized access to PHI. These physical measures and PMP protect a covered entity's electronic information systems and related buildings and equipment from natural and environmental hazards, as well as unauthorized intrusion by a hacker or employee who should not have access. The security rule comprises regulations related to the security of electronic health information. The security rule provides regulations related to electronic transactions and code sets. The policies and procedures required by the security rule must be maintained for 6 years. Health Information Technology for Economic and Clinical Health Act. It's a provision of the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. It strengthens HIPAA privacy protections and rights. And it's brought compliance changes to 3 areas: business associates, notification of breach, and civil penalties for noncompliance. All business associates must now comply with HIPAA as covered entities would. They also must implement physical and technical safeguards as outlined in the security rule. Covered entities must notify the affected party of a breach no later than 60 calendar days after the discovery of the breach. HIPAA Omnibus Rule. The final HIPAA Omnibus Rule is an update to the existing HIPAA law and Health Information Technology for Economic and Clinical Health, the HITECH Act. It's modified both privacy and security rules for covered entities and their business associates. It became effective March 26th of 2013. It enhanced patient privacy rights and protections and strengthened the ability to enforce the HIPAA privacy and security protections. It expanded many requirements of business associates who receive PHI. Consequences of non-compliance with HIPAA and the HITECH Act. The Civil Monetary Penalty CMP law, which under that falls monetary fines, civil and/or criminal, imprisonment, criminal. DAHS handles issues regarding transaction code sets and security. The OCR oversees privacy issues and complaints and refers criminal issues to the Officer of Inspector General, the OIG. The OIG provides workup for referral cases which may involve the FBI and other agencies. Application of practice setting. HIPAA affects all areas of the healthcare office. Every staff member must be educated about HIPAA and trained in the P&P pertinent to the organization. Reasonable safeguards are measurable solutions based on accepted standards that are implemented and periodically monitored to demonstrate that the office is in compliance. And this concludes the lecture of Chapter 2, Privacy, Security, and HIPAA.